Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Cardano Artist Podcast. Brian Lee could not make it today, so hi, Brian. See you next time. Today we have as our guest visionary painter and artist Keith Prossick. I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Keith. Welcome to the podcast.
Close. It's Prossick. It's close enough.
Cool. So, Keith, could you just tell us a little bit about yourself, like where you're from, what is your story, and how did you become involved in art in the first place?
Oh wow, that's a that's a big question. But first, thank you for inviting me, Alfred. I know we had been reaching out to each other through Twitter over the past few weeks as we're all riding this Cardano wave that is sort of pointing us towards August. So, but yeah, it's a pleasure to come on and have a chance to talk to you about my work. And like as you said, I am a visionary artist. It's a genre that exists out there. If you Google visionary art, you'll pull up a lot of amazing artists that are like Alex Gray, Allison Gray, Randall Roberts, Morgan Mandala, Autumn Sky, Adam Sage, Ernst Fluke. There's a huge just plethora of just wonderful artists working and driving the genre forward. So I kind of was the reason why I got into painting. I actually came up through architecture. I studied as architecture. I'm a practicing architect.
Right.
And coming up, and the real funny thing is coming up through architecture, I hated painting. It was the worst class that I had to take in college because being an architect, everything was very precision oriented, sharp edge, sharp point, clean, using the compass. Everything had to be measured, everything had to be precise. And, you're driven in that direction. And when I would look at the tip of a paintbrush, I'm like, this is just too much chaos. It was too much chaos for me. So I never really took to it. It wasn't really until I was about in my late 20s, in my early 30s, that, I started coming across artists in the visionary art realm that were sort of painting like just modern day expressions, painting what I was kind of experiencing with the changes in my life at that time. And, starting to have like these just, it sounds campy to say visions, but that's what they are. There are these impressions that are getting imprinted from you, on you, and you're trying to make sense of them. And I couldn't make sense of them. And it ultimately drove me to looking at the idea of mandalas, because I realized there was a pattern that already existed out there in sort of traditional Hindu and Buddhist sort of schools where, and they're the ones that actually, it came up through a lot of different cultures. It came up through Native America, it's come up through Europe, South America, Aztecs played with it a little bit too. And it's just the Tibetans and the pretty much, and I think India gave it a name and they called it Mandala, which translated Sanskrit for circle. And
can I ask you something, Keith?
Yeah.
How did you find all these different art cultures? I mean, did it sort of come to you, or did you go out and look for it?
I started looking at it. I like to joke. It's more of a joke than anything else, but I like to call myself a recovering Catholic. But once a Catholic, always a Catholic. But there were a lot of the impressions that I had in my early years were leading me towards questions that Catholicism couldn't answer.
Right.
And ultimately, I just started exploring.
Looking into different cultures, basically.
Looking towards different cultures. And, from the West, you tend to follow the Silk Road towards the East. And, kind of did that metaphorically in my mind. And, it kind of came through Buddhism, which Buddhism ultimately kind of backwards oriented, introduced me to its roots, Hinduism. And
Keith, did you travel to any of those countries, or?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I finally, in 2015, I was able to travel to India and spend 2 weeks on a little walkabout over there. And, it was more oriented towards looking at the, the ancient spiritual ideas of India, not necessarily in more of a casual way. I think the ideal, like the best day of the trip was winter solstice, where we went out on Varanasi is like the root of Hinduism. It's where, like they say, like if you're cremated there, you achieve moksha, which is release from the cycle of birth and death. And so we went out. It's the one where you normally see everybody coming down the steps and they come into the Ganges and they're worshiping the rising sun, right, or greeting the sun coming up in the morning. So we went out on the boat before the sun came up, and there were all of these basically people coming down the steps, and you realize that they've been doing this before those steps were even there, and they had been doing this. This is a daily practice that has been going on for thousands of years. Right. And and you sit there and you just tap into that, the ritual aspect of the starting of the day. And it was very profound experience watching the sunrise and starting to hit all of these temples and all of the architecture that is just up against the river was mind-blowing. And then later on that day, we got into a car and drove for 6 hours to Bodh Gaya. And Bodh Gaya is where the Bodh tree is that the Buddha sat under that had his awakening. Right. Okay. So we went to that temple, and so we were at this meditating under the Bodh tree at sunset. So we hit both of those roots of both of those religions at sunrise and sunset, and it's probably one of the most profound days of my life. And it was winter solstice, and it was basically from that we were getting back. It was the end of our trip, so it was a very, very amazing sort of just climax to the end of that experience, which gets fed back into my artwork. The final cultural imprint. Yeah, and it's like, even though it seemed very foreign to me, there was this sense of connection there and familiarity that I had been there before, and so, but yeah, it was a pleasure to be able to go there, and then you get to see temples and architecture that follow this form that I had followed there. So it was a nice, the mandala was a nice blending between my architectural mind and my artistic mind. Yeah, sure. And, the digital realm and the VR realm is now the place where I'm finding where I can sort of merge these two aspects of myself, both in an analog way and a digital way. Right. Okay. So, fantastic. So your artistic style is very, very distinct. So how did you develop this? Just finding my way. I had to learn how to paint on the fly. So, like I said, I came up not liking painting, so I did the paintings that I needed to for classes, and they were acrylic. But when I started making that movement, I started trying to do it in my old medium and doing it drafting and using colored pencils, and I realized I had to there was this day where I was like, I don't know if I can curse on this, but it was just like, crap, I'm going to have to learn how to paint. Right. I'm going to have to literally force myself to do this thing that I don't like doing. And the beautiful thing about the mandala is it's a very, very simple structure that has simple rules. It has very simple rules that you can get these complex patterns out of. And it's all symmetrical, and it's all reflections of itself. Can you just give us a very short description of mandala? How would you describe it? Well, the way that they define a mandala is it's an imprint of the universe that surrounds you. Right. A mandala also tends to be an architectural blueprint for the hyperdimensional palace that the deity that is represented with, or the idea or the spiritual concept inside of the mandala. Right. So, and it's also a form of storytelling, visual storytelling. So it's hitting a lot of things that I have a lot of passion about: architecture, art, and storytelling. And spiritualism. Being able to portray the story of where we come from, but also guide us in a direction for being able to figure out ways for new crises that face us that are new. And we're facing a lot of new ones today that like our ancestors had not faced.
Mm-hmm. I mean, while we are talking, we're showing images, you know, we're superimposing images of your art on our conversation also. But there are two pieces that because I had to pick two of them. I could have picked 50, but there's two pieces that I picked out just to ask you about if there's any particular inspiration for them. One is called The Vitruvian Man, and the second one is called Morning Sunshine. So did you have any particular inspiration for these two?
Both good choices. Well, Vitruvian Man, I'll start Vitruvian Man because that's the easy one. Vitruvian Man is basically Da Vinci. It's my interpretation of studying Da Vinci, and I've done a lot of this. You can see I've got Rodin over here, and I've got Michelangelo over here. So I study the masters, and I try to study the brushstrokes. So the Vitruvian Man was me trying to study the drawing by Da Vinci, which is Vitruvian Man.
Right.
And
exactly.
And basically what Da Vinci was doing was he was studying the works of, I believe, the 4th century architect Vitruvius, hence Vitruvian Man, who wrote the 10 books of architecture. And in the 10 books of architecture, Vitruvius put forth the proportion of the human form.
Right.
And Da Vinci studied it and realized that Vitruvius was off. And so Da Vinci corrected it the way that Da Vinci did with everything, you know, kind of realigned, you know, the wheel a little bit. But then also I understood that Da Vinci's Vitruvian Man is only the famous one that we know. There's others that are out there that have been done by other artists. So it was like a common theme, like almost like the Pieta of the Renaissance. The Vitruvian Man was also a common theme amongst artists to experiment with. So it was just a way of me understanding the proportions of the human form and studying Da Vinci and just kind of doing it in my own way, you know, and finding my style through it. So it's one of my earliest pieces. It goes back to, I believe, 2008, 2009. And then Morning Sunshine is basically a friend of mine plays bass guitar. And he showed a picture on his social media of this beautiful shot that he had of his bass guitar. And I loved it. And I asked him if I could make a painting of it. And he was like, sure. And so from that, you know, I took his image and then I put my style on it and imagined it playing. So in southeastern United States, we have this sort of Southern thread type music, folk music, mountain music that kind of has, you know, evolved since colonial days here before America was even here. You know, a lot of bass guitar, a lot of fiddles, a lot of dancing. So the piece represents basically Appalachian music. And that's the Appalachian Mountains on the East Coast. And typically Georgia, North Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and into Virginia, and a little bit Tennessee and Kentucky in there as well. And the music is just, it's fiddling. It's just making the music blend with the moment. It's a lot of improvisation and feeling and people putting their themes into each other, and like one like the violinist will play and the guitarist will play, and it will just go back and forth, and it goes back and forth between bands all night long. We go out into the woods and we dance in the woods until the dawn. So Morning Sunshine is sort of like
celebration
the energy
of life almost.
Yeah, just dancing in the moment all night long, just letting it all go. Exhausted out of your mind, knowing that you've got 2 hours left to go until that sun comes up over the mountain, but you just push. And then when that sun peaks over that mountain, it hits everybody. And that cheer that goes up, it's like, we made it. And it's like Morning Sunshine. And then you do like the last few bits of dance, and then you just collapse into your tent.
So that's Morning Sunshine.
Yeah, so cool. Morning Sunshine. So and that's part of the series. I've got a series of those that I want to do, and the next one is Moon Shadow. It's of a violinist in the moonlight.
Well, looking forward to that one. Next question is most of your artwork primarily hand painted, or you also paint digitally?
It's a little bit of both. I am ultimately blending the two. There's when I got on it, when I started painting, digital painting was just being able to use a mouse and using Microsoft Paint, which, you know, Corel and Adobe just finally like were on the scene, but there were no digital tablets. So like everything that I do, like up until about a year ago, has been directly on the canvas oil painting. Mm-hmm. But now I do is I capture them and I bring it in and I refine it into the digital. But then I take sometimes I'm starting to take the digital part and I'm putting it back onto the canvas and then creating another layer. So trying to create a feedback loop. And then every new layer that comes on feeds itself, puts itself onto the piece, and it evolves through time. And the idea is that somebody's like, I'm not a very static person. I'm a very evolutionary person. I like process. I like being able to transform one. I like the delta. I like the rate of change. And I like being able to see it. And I like to be able to compare it because I can see a path that is followed there. So it's always been hard in the analog, just painting on the canvas. It's fixed. I want to bring it to life, you know, and I want it to transform, and I want the pieces to transform with me in my life. So at the end of the day, there's this path of evolution that a lot of these pieces have changed as they explore into different mediums, as I explore into the digital. What can I do in virtual reality and 3D modeling with some of these pieces? You know, so I feel like it's just I'm feeling like I'm in a transition in my life, in my artwork, where like as Cardano and cryptocurrency is starting to take hold and the NFT scene is developing and the virtual and digital realm is getting solidified. And we're realizing that the analog, there are important things of the analog that we can't let go of. We need to keep up because the analog is as important to the feeling of
the basis.
Digital. And so up until now, this moment over this past year with the Pan, I call it, everything was looking in towards the past. So all of my artwork is looking at where we've come from.
Right.
Now, as I'm moving into the digital realm and into this digital technology, my mission with my artwork is transforming with myself, transforming into that realm where now I'm like, okay, I've got 20 years of looking in this direction. How do we take all this? Because I've looked at all of the different avenues that we've come from, scientific, spiritual, fantastical, you know, and historical, and bringing that, and like, how can we take all of that and find the common denominator, find everything that links it all together and envision a future, and I like to say beyond our current fetish for the apocalypse, because it feels like we have this fetish for the apocalypse that we just keep wanting to feed into ourselves. If you look at everything that's coming out in American theater these days, it's all apocalyptic.
Yeah.
It's like, when can we get to the point where the concept of the apocalypse is a myth and a legend that we can laugh about?
Yeah.
Like, oh, remember when we were silly and we thought about killing ourselves on a mass level?
Yeah, it's time to move on. Listen, you in this whole evolution, you're also working on your first NFT, right? So I see a bit about that on your Twitter.
I've got a few test NFTs.
Tell us about the process and what it's like, and is it on NFT, or do you have any experience with other platforms? And
well, here's the deal. I mean, I turned 50. This is April the 19th. I turn 50 tomorrow. So I hit my 50 cent tomorrow. And I was planning to do a big 420 drop for my birthday, sort of as to be the kickoff, like sort of,
congratulations.
I was going to drop this one piece that I'm working on called Star. And I've got a couple of my test ones that are up on OpenSea right now of it, like a black and white
NFT
version.
platform, right?
Huh?
OpenSea is an NFT platform.
Yeah, OpenSea is just, it's a really simple NFT marketplace that you can just get going. And I'm just experimenting with it. It's not necessarily a place I feel like I can call home, because the interface and user interface. You can't like or follow other artists easily without having them come through email. So it's got a lot of work to do for it. Right. So, I mean, it's great for like taking the first steps in it. But the problem is like, I want some of my, the biggest problem that I have is I have an audience that does not collect cryptocurrencies. 95% of my audience does not have cryptocurrencies, and about 50% of that audience isn't really active on social media.
Sure.
So it's
how do you make the transition?
It's a hard transition, and it's one also I have to like feel like there's a really big sense of responsibility of me as an audience, with my audience, as the artist, trying to help bring them into this new realm.
Right, you've become an educator.
Doing it where they're not like not doing like having to invest $10,000 in a drop that I am doing. I want to make it affordable, and it's a way that my work has always been, because I want the work more out of there than sort of isolated in somebody's home that pays a big deal of money for it. Right. Because it's the idea is to connect all of our stories together and use the artwork as a way to talk about the hard things and the good things. So I've got to bring that in there. So that's where my difficulty has been. And the problem is with the gas fees on Ethereum right now. And to me, that's a sign that it's a bubble. I mean, the fact that the gas fees are as big as they are, I feel like it's at the point where there's so many people affecting the system. And with the erraticacies happening out of China with Bitcoin at the moment and the mining, it's it's hard to be able to convince people that are not in that direction to make the transition in that moment.
It all sounds very abstract.
Like my goal was to make like my first NFTs, I look at as buying stocks in my artistic practice. Like I've already been established for 15, 20 years. I'm going to be doing this until I die. I'm doing this for the rest of my life. I got 20 years of content trying to come out of my mind. And, you know, so I'm trying to hopefully use NFTs as a way to be able to create a base income level, to be able to work as an artist and be able to have my audience be able to interact with me directly and not be like isolated, like I'm this big artist and I don't talk to anybody. You know, there's the artwork is to find people to talk about these things, and engage with the audience in that way. And I see them as stocks, like that people can invest in my company and the hope that because they're a token, they will grow in value. And there's so much potential that people aren't even looking at. I mean, they're looking at the sensationalism of Paris Hilton over the past few days, you know, Beeple, you know, and like all these people making millions of dollars and trying to grab into that gold rush. They're missing the point of what NFTs are really, really about.
Yeah, it's actually the opposite.
Yeah, and it's about using them as a tool to be able to solidify the connection between me as the audience, me as an artist, and the audience, and protecting my work in the digital realm, but then able to authenticate it moving forward, that it is of mine. So I wanted the NFTs to be in the $50 range, you know, and like to do a limited run, so a lot of people would be able to invest in it,
access,
as you think of it, like as a stock, and as a return, what they would get for their NFT would be a license to be able to use that image in personal use for whatever they want to.
There's a Kickstarter project that you're working on called Arcane Arena. Is that still relevant, or?
It is very relevant. It's sort of the first out. It's a couple things. First, it's my first endeavor at world building, which is, I love that we live in a time where the term world building can be a profession, where I actually come in and develop the look, the mythology, the nuances of the universe that the game, or the world that the game takes place in. And so what Arcane Arena is is it's an actual board game. And for people that are familiar with the card game Magic the Gathering, which is a card game that you face off against opponents that has been popular in America for 25 years now.
Right.
It's a mixture of that and chess. And basically you have cards in your hand that control your character that is on the board.
Oh, okay.
And you go through two phases, a training phase and a combat phase. And ultimately, you build up, everybody comes to the game on the same level, and you develop your cards, and you go through a training phase, and then you spar against each other, and then it goes back and forth. And through it, you're watching what your opponent's doing, you're trying to adjust with what your opponent's doing, you're working to your benefits, but you're also dealing with a little bit of luck because you never know what cards are going to be coming. But everybody starts from the same point, and it's just a game I've been developing for about 18 months with my business partner, Chris Tourloukis.
And at what stage are you now, Keith?
Huh?
At what stage are you in the game with the development?
I am finally have all of I'm doing the artwork for 46 different cards. And I'm finally at the point where all of the artwork is composed, and I'm finalizing the artwork, and we're getting ready to kickstart at late spring, either the end of May or the early part of June is where we're aiming at. So
it's fun. It's interesting to me. What do you think is the most important thing that you feel that you've learned from making your art so far? Is there such a thing, or
figuring out who I am? That is what the artwork is mostly about, is me figuring out the difficult things that I'm working through. And, it's like we all, as human beings in this human condition, we all have our trials and tribulations we go through that, like, some make sense, don't make sense. The canvas has always been that space where I can reflect on myself. Like every piece is a reflection of that thing that I am experiencing. Like, just to tap into the Hindu side of things, when you see a Hindu deity, it's not really worshiping that deity, it's you worshiping the aspect of that deity and channeling them through yourself, because each of those deities are for specific situations in your life that you deal with. So it's being able to use the canvas as a playground to be able to explore that. And, that's really what it's about. And, like I said, I'm the out there type of guy. Ultimately, I am painting the world I want to dive into.
Listen, Keith, we're sort of coming already to the end of the interview. Time is short. First, last question is: do you have a message for anybody out there that is watching this, not only in the Cardano crypto community, but also people as a whole, people that might be interested in your art?
And I guess this is just a generic out there to everybody that is going through this big, huge wave that is coming through right now, is just breathe, hold on, focus, and listen, observe, and especially for the people going through this wave for the first time. It ebbs and it flows. There's going to be bubbles. The bubbles are going to be popping. You're going to get through it. It's not the end of the world. It's always a cycle, and there's always the next wave. And right now, the next wave has already started. That's right. At the end of every wave is the beginning of the next wave. And the third gen cryptocurrencies are coming online with their NFTs. And that's what we need to be. That's what you all need to be ready for. The starting line is, I think with Cardano, it looks like the starting line is August right now. Yeah. Like, it feels like all of the, like,
exactly. And the floodgates are going to open. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
one hell of a journey.
Don't fight trying to sustain the previous wave. Let it go.
Let it go and move on.
That's my advice.
Fantastic. Keith, where can people find you? What are your social media details?
The easiest way is just my website, keithprossickarts.com. Or just follow me on Twitter. I'm highly active on Twitter. I'm on Twitter pretty much most of the day at this point. Yeah. I've been on Twitter for 12 years, and I finally figured out how to use it 3 months ago. So I'm finally understanding. Oh, okay. So this, because every social media has its own little nuances. Like, okay, now I understand Twitter.
Yeah,
so I'm on Twitter.
It has its own laws, right?
Yeah, because it's just that's where everybody's talking right now. I'm trying to get used to Discord, but ultimately everything's going to go through my new website that's coming, which will be keithprossick.com. Okay. I want to do an art walkabout where I am traveling the world on social media. I've spent the last year getting myself where I can do my job anywhere. I want to do a walkabout meeting all of the Cardano communities, and I want to be able to document and travel the world only paying with Cardano.
That's right.
And I'm going to keep trying that until I can actually do a full cycle around just paying Cardano. That's the goal of like the project that I'm working on, trying to understand NFTs. Once I know I can do that and we can do that, the rest falls into place.
Let's make it happen all together.
Absolutely.
Keith,
thank you so much for having me, and thank you for reaching out.
It was a real pleasure, Keith.
Absolutely.
Take care. See you soon.
Take care.